Hello, dear students. Welcome back. This is Dr. GovindSaraswat, Assistant Professor in English from Government College, Digana. Dear students, today I am going to tell you how are antithesis, paradox, and oxymoron different from one another. The difference lies in the purpose and the way they are used. If we try to pay attention on these two things, I think we can easily find the difference. We often get confused because we generally think in terms of opposition only. But this opposite quality serves different purpose in these figures of speech. This video is only about the difference. And if you want to know more about these figures of speech, please watch the concerned videos on these figures of speech on my YouTube channel. Let's begin with the main purpose of this lecture. I have chosen some examples because we have already talked about the theoretical aspect. So let's begin with the practical way. The example which I have chosen for antithesis is uh, from a very famous novel, A Tale of Two Cities, written by Charles Dickens. It begins with a very famous line. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Antithesis is about an emphasized meaning which is brought out by a contrast between two opposite ideas set against each other. So, when we read this statement, when we read this example, we find that one idea, it was the best of times, is set against and another one, that is, it was the worst of times. And when we focus on the contrast between these two sentences, we can find the intended meaning of the writer. So here we can see that Charles Dickens is pointing out a class war between the rich and the poor, as well as the dichotomy of life being filled with the good and bad times. Then, how can we trace out the use of this figure of speech antithesis? We have to focus on these two things: the way an antithesis is used, and the purpose of the writer. The way is that the writer uses parallel grammatical structures in both the sentences. One more example I can cite is that speech is silver and silence is gold. But it is not necessary that the writer uses parallel grammatical structure. Sometimes it can be different, like marriage has many pains, but celibacy gives no pleasure. So we generally it is that the writer uses grammatical parallel grammatical structures, but sometimes we need to focus on the contrast also, because uh, the contrast between the two ideas create the effect of this figure of a speech, and the purpose is to emphasize the intended meaning of the writer. And I have already mentioned that, and that can be brought out by focusing on the contrast between these two opposite ideas. So it is all about the figure of a speech antithesis. The next one is paradox. I have taken an example from a play named entitled Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. There he writes, "Cowards die many times before their death." So paradox is only one idea, and that one idea is self-contradictory. Mark the difference between antithesis and paradox. We find two parallel grammatical structures in antithesis, whereas in paradox, only one idea, and that one idea is self-contradictory. When we read this line, we find that we get confused that how is it possible? Because the argument is set in such a way that it affects a logical meaning on the surface level. Logically, we can say that how can a person die before his or her death? And here we find that many times before their death. But when paradoxes always hint towards a philosophical or deep meaning. When we read this line, we feel that William Shakespeare is trying to suggest that we must face our fears. The more we run away from our fears, the more they will chase us, and we will die inside us because we feel that we are not behaving like a brave person, a human being. I am reminded here of a line by Ernest Hemingway when he wrote in Old Man in the Sea that a man can be destroyed, but he can never be defeated. So this is the spirit of what we call uh, that lies in a human being. So the purpose of using this figure of speech is to hint towards a greater truth, and we can also feel that paradox shows the philosophical approach of a poet. Next one is oxymoron. I have selected some examples like destroyer and preserver. It is from Out to the West Wind. Pleasing Pain is from Wordsworth. Witty Fool, Seriously Funny, Deafening Silence. And this Darkness Visible is from Paradise Lost of John Milton. And Sordid Boon is again from Wordsworth's sonnet, The World is Too Much with Us. When you read these phrases or words, you feel that they are contrary in nature. But even then, when they are used side by side, they create a different effect. So, oxymoron is all about when a writer uses two opposite terms or phrases side by side. But sometimes generally we can see that they are used for only one concept. Like destroy and preserve is used for west wind, pleasing pain is for life, darkness visible is all about the atmosphere of hell when God hurled Satan with all his followers into the hell, and sordid boon is for money. So the purpose may be different. Some writers use oxymoron for philosophical, some other for serious, and someone tries to make a humorous effect. Very often we can say that some use it for purely aesthetic or artistic purpose, and sometimes for satirical purpose. So this is what we mean by paradox. It lies in the use of two contrary words or phrases that are yoked together in order to make us familiar with one concept. Let's summarize the difference once again. You can find the difference when you when you first focus on the construction of the statement or sentences which you find in front of you. Antithesis can be found in two parallel grammatical structures or sentences. Paradox, only one sentence that is self contradictory in itself. And oxymoron lies in two opposite words or phrases which are used side by side. Then, how can we figure out the purpose? When we can figure out the purpose of the poet in when he uses antithesis, when we focus on the contrast between these both the sentences. Mind it, the word is very important, contrast. It is the main purpose, because चीज़ें जो होती है वो contrast में और ज़्यादा निकल के सामने आती है. Paradox, when we focus on the deep and philosophical meaning of that single sentence. An oxymoron, when we focus on both the opposite words and phrases which are used together. So, this is all about the difference, and I feel that now you feel that these figures of speech called antithesis, paradox, and oxymoron, they show some opposite qualities, but this opposite quality serves different purpose. And now you may feel that the difference can be traced out if you focus on the way they are used and the purpose behind using these figures of speech. I hope that this lecture will be very useful for you to understand these three figures of speech, and I want you to analyze more and more examples so that this difference can be more clear. Thank you.